So
That's right. Absolutely. Thank you.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, we'll get started. It's 6 here my time in Ohio. Sierra here with the e-community. We have Mark and Reeve in the background, as always, running the show, doing the important work. And our guest speaker today, Jaclyn. So this is our page here, and I'll just go ahead and let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey and where you're going with it with your company, and kind of take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi, my name is Jaclyn Yost, and I'm the founder of Ecomadic. Ecomadic is a curated marketplace for local and sustainable businesses, and then we also have an online green travel magazine where we educate on topics like climate change, conscious travel, environmental social justice, green guides, and sustainable living. I started Ecomadic as a blog about 4 years ago. I had just graduated from undergrad at University of South Carolina in hospitality and tourism management. And I moved to Southeast Asia because I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I thought that I might as well just travel across the world and figure it out. And when I was over there, I started traveling around and noticing the negative impacts that were occurring because of mass tourism, which honestly really surprised me because in the textbooks, they always just try to paint tourism as this beautiful and idealistic way of like traveling, when in reality, a lot of negative environmental, socio-cultural, and economic problems can come out of it. But if you do it in a responsible manner, then you can have then sustainable tourism can work effectively to bring positive impacts to local communities and the environment. So I started involving myself in conscious communities, freelance travel writing, working some internships in the impact startup space, and started Ecomadic as a blog. I was just talking about like sustainable tourism 101 issues and selling like bamboo straws and ethical souvenirs in my marketplace. But quickly, when I started doing my master's and I started doing some research in greenwashing, I realized that this was a lot bigger of a problem that I needed to tackle and take on. So now Ecomadic, a pandemic, 2 accelerator programs, and like 3 years later, has turned into what we're building today. So right now we received our first investment check, yay, and we're in development of our new platform that will offer bookings and review services, which will be done in about 2 months. And then we also educate through our online green travel magazine, which launched last week. So that's kind of a high level overview, but feel free to ask me some questions about the specifics. I know I just threw a ton at you.
Yeah, you guys have a lot of exciting stuff going on. That's really cool. I am so happy for you guys. It seems like you're doing a lot. So tell the audience where you're based and just take us on a timeline. Tell us, how old are you?
I'm 27.
Okay, we're the same age. That's funny.
I love it.
So tell us about your time in undergrad, and then you were mentioning going back to grad school, and then kind of when did you launch this company, and then how has it grown?
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated in 2016 from University of South Carolina, and I moved to Asia that December, and I started traveling around Southeast Asia and enrolled in my master's in 2017. So it had been a few months until I decided that I really wanted to start undergrad or a postgraduate degree. So my master's was in international business, but we got to choose our dissertation topic. So I chose greenwashing in the international hospitality and tourism industry. And I got a research grant from the Global Sustainable Tourism Council. So I flew to Bangkok to attend their training. And the summer of 2018, I traveled around Borneo, and I was just comparing eco labels. And that's when Ecomadic had already started launching. I launched it in March 2018, but I was just blogging and not really. It was just like a side hobby. So then I took it down after my master's research results because I got distinction on those. And I just started picking up picking up like what we would need to implement into the business to kind of fight and combat greenwashing. And so we went into redevelopment in the December of 2018, and we were supposed to launch in March 2020, which was like the most unideal time to launch a travel startup in the world. But I was just in slow regrowth process. I had moved to Hong Kong to get a PhD at the time, but I was actually attending PolyU, which was taken under siege in the pro-democracy protests. So I left Hong Kong from that. And then I was traveling around, and then COVID hit. And so I came back to the US. During this downtime, I have done 2 accelerator programs. I did one with the George Washington University Summer Startup Accelerator, and then I just most recently completed Founders Institute in New York. But throughout the year, I was in DC for 6 months, and then I traveled around for 6 months by car. And I just was kind of picking which cities I would want to live in. So I had some time in Denver, I had some time in Seattle, and then I ended up in New York because I've always wanted to live here. But it didn't seem like a good time until this past summer. So now I've been here for 6 months, which is crazy. Time is flying, but I'm so happy to be here. I honestly think that I wouldn't have come home if the pandemic weren't to happen. So, and I guess that's the silver lining, is that I'm really enjoying New York and being close to home and family and friends again.
Good. So are you doing this all on your own, or what does your team look like?
So we have a powerhouse team of about 25 to 30 of us right now.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I just started kind of opening up that, like, just during the pandemic, where other people started helping me, and just a ton of people reach out organically from finding us through Instagram, or they've found our website and or have been searching for sustainable tourism and realize that there's not that much of resources out there on the topic. So I've been very fortunate in the way that a lot of people want to get involved. My core team, though, is amazing because I've known 3 of them since I was young. And then, like, I met Annie, who's our CFO, in high school. And then I met one of my project managers in middle school. And then I actually met Lucy, who is my CMO, at a Yoga India retreat in 2018. So these people have serendipitously like crossed paths in my life, and now we get to all work on Ecomadic together. And then we have internship programs. So that's like our content writers, and we have a whole tech side of things. We have sales department. Yeah, I feel very fortunate and blessed, and I love talking to them every single day.
So did you guys end up figuring out that you're going to work together through these relationships, or did it just happen to work out that way?
It just worked out that way, and how everyone has gone down their own individual career paths and where they would like to fit in. I had been working on it for 3 years now, or at the time where people started helping me out. So I think it was more so they saw how passionate I was about the project and wanted to figure out how they could get involved too. In full transparency, I needed a lot of help, and I still do. So love that they help me out every single day and that they wanted to get involved, because I think that's something really special, is that I get to work with some of my best friends in the world, but we get to share a professional project together. And I know sometimes mixing business and friends is not the best idea, but I feel like the people who I do work with and align myself with take it very seriously and understand that it's business at the end of the day.
Yeah, that is important. It can be tough, but if you have the right perspective, I think it can be a good fit as well. It just depends on the relationships, and like you said, just knowing when and what type of relationship to be putting first.
Definitely. No, completely agree.
So tell us about traveling. It seems like your love for travel may have even brought you to where you are with your business. So talk a little bit about that, and elaborate on the things that you're mentioning, things that you were seeing that you thought might be having a negative impact from tourism.
Definitely. Yeah, it's funny because I moved abroad my senior year of high school, and my mom got a job offer in London. And at the time I was like, this is the end of the world because I was moving my senior year of high school away from my friends. But quickly, as soon as I got there, I realized that it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. I loved just getting to experience a different culture, a new way of life, and having the accessibility. London was so close. Well, now it's the UK is separate from Europe now, but at the time it was part of the EU. So it was just able to access countries very easily. So that was kind of my whole insight to the international world at first. But I actually went into school as a marine biology major, which is so different from where I am today. And yeah, I switched into hospitality and tourism because University of South Carolina has such a great program, and it just really made sense to me with my interests. And I had been working in restaurants, and I was interested in hotels and private clubs at the time. So I just built up my experience there, but the sustainability aspect didn't come until I went to Southeast Asia, and I was in Thailand, and I just wasn't expecting how the tourism, like mass tourism, would impact the landscape there. I know it sounds very cliche to say that like elephant riding and seeing like full moon parties is the reason why I got interested into sustainability, but it truly is I saw that there were the same souvenirs on every corner that are imported from mass in international places in factories. And then I also was seeing that there were restaurants that are becoming more and more popular that are just international chains as well as hotels and not contributing towards the local economy. And then also I just think that a lot of the environmental, like natural resources like water and clean access to water and land is getting taken away from the locals, and that a lot of it is being conserved and preserved for specifically tourists, which I think that once you start neglecting like your local communities for economic gain of tourists, that's when a really big problem is coming up. And you see that a lot in Southeast Asia. Like they got really hit with tourism. And I remember the one, like after seeing all this and kind of keying into all these problems, the last like straw, I guess, that I knew I had to do something was when I went to Maya Beach in the Fifi Islands. And it's beautiful. I'm sure you've seen pictures of it, but it first became popular because Leonardo DiCaprio, which is so ironic, he like filmed a movie there and he's such a big environmentalist. I'm sure he's so sad that the beach got totally overrun by tourists after this. But they've actually had to shut down the island, and because of how bad the situation was becoming, like the coral reefs were becoming bleached and dying. The sand is completely eroded, and now they can't even let tourists on the beach anymore, let alone locals. So I think that was my defining moment, because no one else really seemed to care. Everyone was just like, oh, it's still so beautiful. But the fact that we've destroyed an island to the point where we can't even go on it anymore, but we still are like boating around it and just like taking in the beauty. I see a really big problem in that.
Yeah, and those individual ecosystems too that other people, a lot of people don't think about as that. They just think about as a place to go and enjoy on their vacation. But those places inhabit all different types of lives and ecosystems that you have to take into account for. So how has all of this knowledge and things that you've realized along the way changed the way that you travel?
I think that from my first perspective, I used to just gravitate towards what I was comfortable with. So even on my master's dissertation, I stayed in 3 different hotels. And it was in Borneo. Sorry if you can hear the New York City background in the webinar. But I used to just gravitate towards what I was comfortable with. And so I think because it was so cheap to travel around Southeast Asia, sometimes you could afford like more internationally owned places, and I started recognizing that wasn't necessarily contributing to the local economy, and that it's also just not as authentic by nature, because you're not really connecting with the local staff. You're not like you find yourself eating in that restaurant, and so you're not really experiencing the full authenticity of the destination. So I really prioritize local and small business. I think that sustainability is a privilege to go through, and I used to only go to places that were eco certified or had like some sort of sustainability mission in it. But by nature, local and small businesses are a lot better for the local economy and for the communities than just sitting or just like going to an internationally owned hotel. So I really just think that that is like my ethos now. I, of course, support like sustainable missions, like especially social, but I really gravitate towards just like local and having the most authentic experience that you can.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you completely changed your major early on, and so do I even need to ask, is this where you thought you would see yourself when you were early in your days?
Absolutely not. It's weird. People ask me how Ecomadic started and if I just always knew that I wanted to do something on my own, but it almost just happened organically and naturally. And I was very lucky to be involved in conscious communities when I was in Singapore and just starting out. So a huge company that I seriously say that I owe my entire career towards is Green is the New Black. They are a conscious media platform in Asia, and I used to write for them, and I helped volunteer at some of their events, and then I ended up speaking at one in the end. But the founder, Steph Dixon, she kind of took me under her wing and really just motivated me and pushed me, because they always say that entrepreneurship is the loneliest journey, which can definitely feel it sometimes. But I think without her pushing me towards that and being able to look up to her and seeing how she was leading a company and that it's like possible to do at such a young age if you really care about it and put your all into it, it's not always going to be easy, but it will be worth it in the end. I think that that was huge for me. So it's just evolved over time. And now I'm just so in deep that I'm like,
Yeah.
happening. So
What were some of your fears early on in the beginning when you were thinking about just going out and venturing off into being, working for yourself, being your own boss, being an entrepreneur?
I think my biggest fear was, it sounds silly, but you always worry about what other people are thinking of you, like when you're kind of promoting a certain Instagram account or like trying to do your own thing. But as soon as I realized that that's just trivial to like get in my way of being able to promote a brand and a cause that I really care about, once I let that go, then I've just, ever since then, it's more so like building it up. What is the best strategy? And then being in accelerator programs when you just are constantly receiving feedback of what you should be doing differently, or, oh, that's Funky, my cat. But if you, what you should be doing differently, or like that the tourism world is huge, so you'll never be able to like actually break into it. I think if I had listened to that advice and just being able to fade out the noise and really going after what I believe in and writing about topics and publishing about topics that I do care about, that you'll eventually find your community, which we're starting to see build up now, and it's really exciting and fulfilling. So I'm really happy I didn't listen to my first gut like feeling, and I've pushed through a lot of that noise, and now I've been really fortunate to find advisors and other people in my life who are pushing me in a certain direction and understand like the mission of Ecomadic and what we really want to fulfill out of it in long term. Yeah, so in a nutshell, that's kind of what would have stopped me in the beginning, but I'm really happy that I pushed through.
I myself, like, I really do enjoy traveling, but that is something that I had thought about. Like, how can I try to live my best sustainable lifestyle and still find a way to do, what I love, which is traveling. I would always feel bad every time I booked a flight. So that's one of the reasons why I started looking for a platform like yours, was because I knew that that's something that was on my mind. So there's way better sustainable influencers out there that I know have to be thinking about that as well. So I think that there is the community out there, and you guys are finally, like you said, getting into it. So that's great. So talk about some of what did you say they were, the conscious communities?
Yes, so the conscious communities that I was involving myself in Asia were Green is the New Black, more specifically. And then I started working in just different startups that were impact driven. And Singapore, Asia's amazing because it is so small, you can understand and like meet the same people who are making an impact. So I really felt like they had a really thick community there and a really strong one. And you would meet different people all the time that were just working on such amazing and innovative projects. So I could just go to some of these like conscious festivals and speak to all these different stands for hours, because there's people who are creatively involved through music, through food, through products and brands, through art. So it was just a really great intro into the sustainability world. I met like movie directors. I met like speakers who had traveled the world and like had spoken TED Talks and worked on like UN projects. I met one lady who was sailing around the world like raising money for UNICEF. So I just think that I was very inspired and lucky to be around people that were so driven like that. And that's something that I hadn't been able to find when I first moved back to the US. But now that I'm in New York, I've been really making my way into these conscious communities. They're definitely starting to grow and develop, but there's still a lot of work to be done. So I think that finding that and building it up is the best way to kind of create change. Because once you're all collaboratively working together, I think you can make a lot stronger of an impact. So with Ecomadic, our mission is to really build that sustainable tourism community. It's funny because if the pandemic weren't to happen, I think that sustainable tourism wouldn't have this much limelight and discussion that it's having right now, because I think a lot of people were stuck at home, couldn't travel, and really started to reflect on the actions of travel that they had been doing. Like you said, flying is a huge one with the amount of carbon emissions that gives off. And that's like one of my biggest eco anxieties as well. I was jet setting around Southeast Asia, like preaching sustainable tourism, like that's not that's kind of contradicting. So it's really been helpful for me as well. It's just to understand like what your actions mean and how they will affect the world and the communities, and really just figuring out how to travel as slowly and authentically as possible, but can also bring a lot of positivities to those communities and destinations that you're going to.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the other question that we talked about just for a second, when you were talking about your mentor and how she was a huge influencer for you. So what were some other things that really motivated you to push past those fears and just go for this vision that you had with Ecomadic?
Yes, so Steph was and still is a huge impact in my life and leader who I look up to so much. I actually got to reunite with her for the first time like a month ago. We went to Paris for the Green is the New Black Festival, and so I got to see her and hug her first time in 2 years. But she's been such a great guide in my life. And then I think the pandemic and having so much time to actually talk to business owners on the phone, talk to people that work in the sustainable tourism industry and just the travel and tourism industry in general, because they had so much time when usually like I can't tell you how many times people told me on the phone, they're like, you would have never gotten me on the phone unless like there was a pandemic happening that stopped me in my tracks. So I really did get to see like a lot of people face to face and learn from businesses that were struggling, like what they're looking for from a bookings platform and like what the unethical practices are. So while the pandemic was terrible and like it impacted the travel and tourism industry a crazy amount, I think that it also brought us all who work in the industry a lot closer together, and that we all got to learn from each other. And now we can move forward and operate in an ethical way, and understand what these pain points are from these local businesses. So I think just connecting with people that share the same vision is what really keeps me going. And I've been fortunate enough to make enough noise where I can connect with business owners, organizations, leaders, and just like other travelers who all want to work towards the same thing.
Definitely. So when you're traveling abroad, are you communicating with all of the locals there and talking about your thoughts on sustainable traveling and ecotourism and all that? Like, what are the locals' thoughts on all of it?
Yeah, I definitely made a point to talk to locals about it when I was traveling, because it was a blog for 3 years. So a lot of the times I would just talk about sustainable tourism 101, interview businesses, and really just learn what they thought of the tourism industry. One conversation that I did have in the Philippines that really stuck out to me was I was talking to one of the hostel owners, and around me was this like crazy just backpacker vibe party, and I was like, where am I was like, do you like this? Like, does this bother you that people just come in and they'll party and not really take in like the beauty of your island, and or sometimes there might not necessarily be the most respectful practices going on behaviors on their end. And he was talking to me about how he sees it as just more of a positive because he remembers the time before tourism and now what his life is like now. But that was just one perspective. And I did have a conversation in Lao, in Vang Vieng, which is one of the biggest backpacker districts in Lao. That's like on like the traditional route that people will take. And now that town is referred to as a tourist ghetto. And it's because there's this really famous and spiritual river there. But it's one of the most popular tourist activities is tubing down the river, and stopping on the different banks, and they'll get different drinks at the banks. But a lot of the times, a lot of people will get very intoxicated, and there's been so many deaths and drowning incidents that have occurred in the river since this that locals will not even go into the river anymore because they think that there are bad spirits. So when we were talking to locals about that, obviously they have a different perspective because of how it's impacting their local community and of traditions that they once had that they can't do anymore. So I think it really is independent on how, first the individual, and then also how tourism is managed in destination, which is why I preach so hard about sustainable tourism and supporting local, and just teaching travelers how they can be the most mindful when they are traveling, because if you can just get so out of control and then it gets to a point where it's so disrupted that there's no, like, you don't even know how to stop this tourist activity because it's bringing in so much economic return, but it's contributing so negatively towards the environment and social communities that you get stuck in a really hard place. So I think it really just depends on what's going on, and definitely destination specific and individual specific of their mindset. But I know it can bring a lot of positives because it does. Tourism is a huge indicator, or a huge GDP producer of the world. So I think that it's a very tricky, touchy subject, and sustainable tourism is hard to implement, especially after mass tourism has taken over.
Mm-hmm. What are some tips that you can give our community, or to anybody who would want to try to maintain a more ethical and local experience while they're traveling, instead of getting like tricked by all of the corner stores with, like you said, the stuff that's been imported internationally that's not even local? So what are some tips and tricks you would give?
Yeah, from an environmental perspective, I think just leave no trace is number one. Really just try to, if you left the area, like no one would ever know that you were there. So that is in terms of trash, it's in terms of going off route, it's not touching like coral if you're out in the ocean, or taking pieces of coral or just different natural remnants from home or to home. And just respecting the land like you would if you were at home. Hopefully you are. And then from a social perspective and an economic perspective, I just always say support local as much as you can. And really just try to talk to shop owners. And a lot of the times, if you're shopping or eating at a certain destination and it's like locally sourced or locally imported, you can talk to the owners and you can really kind of gauge what their mindset is as well. And so that's how I find a lot of the shops that I support when I'm out and about is like, who are the local artisans around? Like, who do you like to support? Where do you like to shop? So just taking local tips as much as possible. And then when you're in your planning phases of the trip, just try to book and support as much local as possible. And then of course, with flights and transport, best to carbon offset. I know it's not not a perfect mechanism, but it does do better than just doing nothing. And so, but if you can choose to not fly, then also look into different routes from like trains and buses, but you should still offset buses and cars if you do take those as well.
Maybe talk about that tool a little bit. I don't think I've heard of it.
Carbon offsetting?
Yeah, your tool for the airport. I think I saw it on your website. Was it integrated in your website somewhere?
Yes, so we are actually in development of a new bookings and reviews platform. So right now we're mainly operating on our magazine.ecomadic.com while we're building out this technology, but we will be having a section on our site that is booking responsible flights, and all of the transport that is booked through our platform will be pre-carbon offset. So you can book a flight, and then with the commission that we get, we'll donate that towards different carbon offsetting projects around the world. And we're vetting those. So right now it can be anywhere from planting trees or to providing safe water, drinking water in different communities. So it will be rotational. It will donate to different carbon offsetting projects, but it's just taking out the extra step, because I think that's what a lot of people forget. They can book a flight and then you have to go to another website and then fill out like what your flight plan was and then go and offset that. So we're just making it really easy and simple, then just automatically doing it and donating our proceeds. And then you'll be able to keep track by how many trees you've planted or how much carbon you've offset by booking your flights and transport through Ecomadic.
Okay, so will that be like a login, like you get a membership, or how will all of that work?
Yeah, so just envision like an eco-friendly trip advising site.
Cool.
Yeah, so you'll be able to book and review with accommodations and experiences, and you'll also be able to book your transport to get there. But then you'll also be able to find shops and eateries as well that are either local or have a sustainable and environmental mission in place.
Okay, so walk us through your website a little bit, and then Mark and Arif can kind of take us through the pages and just talk a little bit about where you are with it now and where you're going. And then you said you got some new stuff coming, so you can talk about that.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I don't have the demo of the bookings and reviews up yet because we just started working with our UX UI designer, but that should be ready in about 2 months. So we are just doing a lot of work on our magazine while our tech side of things is behind the scenes. But we have about 10 contributing content writers. So they're all just writing on different topics like climate change, conscious travel, environmental and social justice, different green guides, and sustainable living. And then once the tech side of things comes out, then that will be the main homepage. And you'll be able to search by destination, and you'll be able to look for just different accommodation shops, eateries, and experiences that you can have that are all local and pre-vetted. So you'll know that they're either environmental or socially sustainable or local, and it will have very clear indications of that. We're also in the process of coming up with a framework because I don't necessarily believe in eco labels. Not to say that they're not great benchmarking systems, but I just think that they're pretty inaccessible for a lot of local businesses to meet up with international demands, or they can be quite costly. And alternatively, some people just don't even choose to go through them because they're super demanding and they think that they can implement sustainability measures in their own.
What would some examples of eco labels be?
So a reputable one that I do like is Travel Life. I do appreciate Travel Life. I think that they are pretty great. But there's over 300 in the hospitality and tourism space. So it can get quite murky because you don't necessarily, some of them you can just kind of pay and then get like an eco label on top of things. But if you look at the GSTC, which is the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, they have a top 4. And those are the accredited certification schemes. So it just, it gets quite complicated. But then there's also B Corp, there's LEED. So there's a lot of certifications out there. There's a lot that are reputable, but not everything is reachable and achievable.
So I'm seeing it there, greenwashing. Talk a little bit about that. I feel like that's one of these big environmental buzzwords that I've been hearing a lot about, and I know the general terminology, but I don't have a master's in it like you do. So let's hear about it.
Yeah, so greenwashing, actually, this is a perfect photo to kind of highlight on it. My greenwashing experience was in mainly accommodations, but this was a picture that I took in Myanmar. when I was on a tour, and this was actually staged authenticity. So the fishermen were out in the lake, and instead of actually fishing, because this was a traditional practice back in the day, they were posing for pictures and charging travelers for them.
Oh,
I think that that's a really great example of it. But the definition that I came up with during my master's was pretty much just like promoting sustainability claims that will that are either misleading or just downright not true, but to reap the socio-economic benefits of being perceived as sustainable. So it can either be just like talking a lot. It can be as simple as like putting like the washing, if you hang your towels, like that card, you know, in the room, you hang your towels, then we won't take them, and we're going to save all this water and energy. And then you go home, or you go get back to your hotel, and it's like fresh set of towels, even though you hung them anyways. So it's really just talking up a lot about like your environmental measures, but not necessarily staying true to them, which I see a lot. And it can come down to people just wanting to say that they're sustainable to get more and more travelers to help support them, or it can be a disconnect between management and actual practices that are happening in the hotel. It's a very, very complicated and tricky topic. I spent like a whole year researching it, because there's no one definition of sustainability, and there's no industry-wide indication of like what you should be doing to be perceived as sustainable. So I think that a lot of people can just take it and run with it, but then it takes away from the people who are actually working towards it because they believe in it and want to see their impact for the greater good.
When you were growing up in your family life, was sustainability something that you guys talked about, or was that practiced? I know for me, it was not at all in my childhood. No one even really knew what it was. So just curious of your background.
It's funny because I think my Oma and my Opa, which is grandma and grandpa in German, they were very sustainable, but just didn't recognize it. And so I think I grew up in a very sustainable household because they hated wasting food. They hated like just like waste. They always, they had their own garden, so they would compost. And I just never realized that that was like what sustainability was. I mean, even wearing a sweater that my Oma knit me, they like made all their own clothes. So I think that it is ingrained in me from a very young age, but I didn't connect all the dots of sustainability until I was in Asia. And I definitely did. I've always gravitated towards more responsible practices, but I don't think that it like I connected all the dots of like what I was actually doing until it was laid out in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, just wanted to take that little side road and then we'll get back to Ecomadic. So everyone that uses your site will be able to just go ahead and book everything they need for a sustainable vacation and not have to second guess themselves or feel guilty about it. Like you said, everything will be pre-vetted and all. So I'm excited. I want to try your platform out.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we're super excited. It's definitely a long time coming, and it will be a lot slower of a process, staying true to sustainability, because we have to individually onboard every company that's coming on, as opposed to just connecting with traditional global GDS systems, so global distribution systems that a lot of the other platforms will connect to. But I think that that just stays true to our ethos and our mission, and really just taking on the businesses that do care.
Are you visiting all of these places, or are a lot of these places you have visited, or are you doing this vetting in an online manner, or how is all of that working?
It's hybrid, I would say. Now that travel is coming back, we're able to travel to more places. I'm still focusing mainly on domestic at the time because I've just learned a lot about tourism in the US that I hadn't really been aware of before, because tourism looks different everywhere. So it's really nice to be home and understand like what the tourism environment looks like here. And then I do have a good network in Asia, so really trying to tap into that. And then also we're starting to spread into Africa, Europe, and Central and South America. So we are hitting all the different continents and destinations, which is great. But yeah, for the most part, we're focusing a lot on domestic tourism, which is nice because we'll actually be able to go into some of these destinations and onboard the businesses there.
Cool. So how many hours a week would you say that you spend doing your role at Ecomadic?
I live and breathe Ecomadic.
So are you doing this for your income right now? Is it turning a profit? Are you doing something else for income in the background while you're building this business?
Yes. So it's been, I've never taken a dime from Ecomadic to this day. And we are now just starting to be in the position where we're able to start to pay some contractors, which is exciting because we're starting to see some checks come in. So we're fundraising right now. And I've always I preach social sustainability. So I want to make sure that my whole team is taken care of before me. So we, as those checks come in, I've been happy to start to be able to pay my staff, but I am doing a bunch of odd jobs on the side, but I've always done it and I appreciate it. I work remotely, so I work on some contracts just from my computer. I do social media and marketing consulting, and I run some tourism development projects and the design for their feeds. So it's fun, ever changing, always busy, working on the weekends, but I think the greater goal is to be able to support myself full time with this within the next year or so.
So do you use all the skills that you do in your background jobs to handle the social media for Ecomadic as well, or is that someone else's role?
Yeah, with Ecomadic, I dip my hands into all different aspects of the business. So I understand, aside from coding and building the tech, like I cannot do that, but I understand what they're doing now, which is great because I've learned so much from my team. So I have to be involved in the sales. I'm involved with the sales or the social media marketing, and then also just like business admin and finances, and then the tech. So I do contribute in like pretty much all aspects of Ecomadic, and then on my contracting roles, I'm mainly on social media and marketing.
I love this question that just came in because it fits right exactly what we're talking with. Do you get time to sleep, Jaclyn?
Some weeks I want to say no, but I've made it my priority to start sleeping more because sleep is life-changing, and I'm 27 and I still feel like I'm like young, but starting to feel my age, if you know what I mean, because you're 27.
Yeah, sadly.
Like sometimes my brain just like shuts off at night now, and I just know if I'm making like silly mistakes that it's time to go to bed. But I am quite busy. I do work like 6 to 7 days a week, and I will be up from the morning until usually around 7 to 1 a.m.
Wow. So, well, like you said in the beginning, though, it seems like it's really starting to pay off. So all your hard work is coming together.
It is, and I don't think of it as work. I know that it's like funny to say that because I know that like people always say stuff like that, like, oh, like once I know that like what I'm doing is like what I love, then that's not work. But I really feel like that's true. I just like love it so much, and I'm like happy every day that I wake up and open up my computer.
That's amazing. That's so inspirational.
Thanks. It's been a long time coming, but I'm excited about it all for sure.
What are some of the things that you do when you do take a break to just kind of recharge and get ready to crunch your next goals?
Yeah, I am a big city person. As you can tell, I live in New York City. Previous cities that I've lived in, Hong Kong, London, Singapore, I just love city life. I think that there's always something going on every time you walk out your door. So in New York, I love music, and so I've been going to a lot of live shows, just seeing different musicians. I think that that's like my favorite way to pass time. And then I also love vintage shopping, and I love the outdoors. So this weekend I'm going to upstate and seeing all the fall foliage. So, and then just hanging out with friends at coffee shops, eating good vegan food. I love dumplings. So, yeah, and art galleries, pop-ups. I went to a sustainable fashion show this past weekend. So I like to keep busy for sure. But yeah, music, vintage shopping, events. Huge.
Definitely there's a geographic difference in the things that go on that are fun to do in my town than there are in yours. Like I would love to go to a sustainable fashion show. I don't think we have those in Dayton, Ohio.
Well, next time, come to New York.
Yeah, maybe I can do that. So if you could go back in time and tell your 18-year-old self something, what would that be?
I think it would be, on a personal note, just to stop caring what everyone else is like doing and like what is thinking, because I've always taken an untraditional route, and I think that there's a lot of societal pressure to kind of take on certain paths, which is fine because like I know that everyone has their own individual needs in their lives, but I think like I let that cloud my headspace for so long, and just not recognizing that my path is unique in its own, and like you can make it however you want to be. So I think that I just spent a lot of time worrying that I wish I didn't, because I was always just like worried if things were going to work out, or if what I was working towards like actually had a meaning and an impact. But I'm happy that I stuck to it, because I would have been, I mean, I'm sure that wherever I would have ended up, I would have been happy, but I think I'm just like so much more happy and fulfilled because I went after like what my true gut instinct was to do.
So were you having a lot of pushback on your ideas about Ecomadic from people, or were you just concerned that that might happen?
I was never getting just like outright pushback. And I've actually been super fortunate to have a lot of support in my life from my close family and friends who really did believe in me and this vision that I had. But I think it was more so just understanding the gravity of like startup life and how big the travel and tourism industry is in the world, and how many people these days are trying to build up their own things, which is great, but it can just be a really crowded space and it can be hard to make yourself known. But I think when you just keep pushing after something for so long, then eventually something's got to give, like if it's a good idea, I guess.
So tell us a little bit more about your support system. Did you have siblings? Was it your parents? I know you mentioned friends.
Yeah, my friends are my world. I love my friends so much. And it's funny because I was living alone for like 4 years in Asia, but I still stayed so close with all my friends at home, and just through like FaceTime and social media. And I had a lot of friends come out and visit me. So they're always what keeps me going. And then my family as well. My Oma specifically, she's always been like my biggest support system. And then my mom and my sister. But it's funny because I feel like I've lived very independently, but the people are always there, which is really nice.
What's something that most people that you're familiar with wouldn't know about you that might shock your friends or family?
About me?
Yeah.
Or like Ecomadic. Oh, okay, about me. That's really, really good question. I'm like such an open book, but no, that's such a hard question. I've never been asked that before. I guess
We
that
can ask another one then. This one probably be a little bit easier. I think everyone can think of one of their biggest failures. So what's something that you failed with early on, but you ended up learning from?
Failed from early on, but ended up learning. I guess it was, this is always like a good job interview question that I should prepare for as well. It's always trial and error. And I guess Ecomadic for me was that, oh, I have a really great one. Okay. It wasn't vetting developers in the very beginning. I lost like 6 months of my time with Ecomadic and like a very large chunk of money in my early days, because I just went off of a recommendation and I just trusted that, which to be fair, I do trust that person to this day. It was just like a bad experience and like situational, but always trust my gut instinct and to kind of do my own due diligence and not worry about like, if it's in business, to not worry about like maybe feelings so much, which sounds kind of rude, but at the end of the day, I could have saved like multiple thousands of dollars, and we had to throw away just like all this code for no reason, which now it's working out because we got an amazing CTO. His name is Mir, and he's been amazing at building and like learning from businesses. But I lost a good like 6 months of development and money because I just trusted this developer and he led us in a very wrong path, and I never like really checked in enough because it was my first time. So yeah, that was a really big failure. And
that would be really hard. I don't know who would know how to approach that in any different way without having experienced it before, though.
And it could have been me just like after realizing that we weren't going to launch and that we had to throw away this code and that everything was pretty much broken and that it would cost double to even just like fix that. So it was pretty much just better to start fresh. I could have very well given up. But the day I found out about this was the first day of my first accelerator program. And that was how I got into this accelerator program. It was what we were banking on. So we had to get really scrappy. And that's when we built up our current like Squarespace site that if you just go to ecomadic.com, that's getting deleted in a few weeks. But we just had to be really scrappy and still make a statement and like work through this accelerator program. But yeah, it was a really, really dramatic and like unfortunate thing to happen. But if I hadn't just started that, I could have very well given up.
Well, it sounds like you adapted pretty well with what you had to work with at the time.
Just keep pushing no matter what throws at you.
We have an attendee comment here. I think initially the early days are always tough, but the hard work will pay off in the long run.
Definitely. I appreciate that.
I do have one question, if I can.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so my question is, I think I'm a bit early on this because you said that the launch will be in 2 weeks. Will there be a mobile app for this or just a browser you can go on the website? And second thing is, can you, because I think you must know about this, what will be a customer journey basically being on your platform? If I'm someone new to this, I download your app and I want to travel. What exactly should I be looking for? And if it's international travel or it's domestic travel? So if you give me information globally or just US?
Great question. So we are doing mainly just starting off domestic, but we are tapping into our international networks now. And so there will be some offerings there. It will mainly be desktop at first because actually looking into studies is that most people will book and do a bunch of their research for travel through a desktop version and just having like a really sleek mobile. So we are just putting a lot of our effort into that, but once we do launch our platform in about 2 months, we will be working on an app following that. So always a constant journey, always constantly evolving, but we want to make sure that our mobile and desktop version is good and pristine for people to be able to go on and start planning their trips. Now, as for the user journey aspect of it, it will be pretty straightforward. You just go to the homepage, such as any trip planning site that you'll go to, like Airbnb, TripAdvisor, Booking.com, and it'll have a prompt where you'll be able to search the destination. You'll be able to search by business type. There will be some suggestions of most popular searches, highest rated places on the platform, and you'll be able to go into that search, and then it will have sustainability and experience-based amenities that you can narrow down what you're looking for. So I think that that's like one of the most unique things about Ecomadic is that we are figuring out a filter system where now travelers will be able to just check off different sustainability measures that they want to contribute when they're traveling and then make their choices in that way instead of just like choosing I'm only going here because of a certain experience. And those are just like basic amenities that you're looking for. So for example, on like cuisine type, you can be searching for like Mexican food, Chinese food, and you can filter it that way. But we are going to start to filter by sustainable practices. So like which restaurants are plastic free, which ones are all local, which ones are working towards zero waste. So really just trying to change consumer mindsets to be searching for like sustainability measures and having that be like a huge drive in their decisions.
So, and I think one more thing, and this will be my last one. With the platform, basically, if you go on Airbnb, like we have our listings there. So people who will have their listings there, we will be getting a discount through Echo with your platform, or it's just you just give the information and we go there and decide it for ourselves, or you take the whole process in for yourself and make us most comfortable for the person who's booking anything.
Yeah, so you'll be able to book everything yourself. We are just a medium platform. I know that millennials looking into travel trends are more inclined to want to be able to book their own and research on their own. So since that's our main target market, we're mainly just a platform that's curating all these responsible businesses, and then you can do the rest.
Oh, God.
I have a question here from an attendee. Thank you for your interaction. It says, will Ecomadic allow members who sign up to loyalty programs, discounts, etc.?
Yes, that is actually something that we're working on now, is building up like what can drive people to book more through our platform. So stay tuned and follow us along, because we will be making those announcements soon, but you'll be able to make an account. You'll be able to track how sustainable your trips are. You'll be able to kind of like accumulate and build relationships with different businesses on our platform. And then there are some loyalty perks and some first member perks. So you should definitely follow us along and sign up when the time comes.
When the time comes, I think we can have you again on, and I think just present that platform basically.
Absolutely.
I think it would be a good thing for our members basically. Yeah, a good exposure.
Absolutely. I'm happy to come on whenever.
What would be some other sustainable amenities in terms of lodging? I know you mentioned some for cuisine, but just curious for what type of hotels or stuff that people could be looking for to be traveling more sustainably.
Yeah, so I think in sustainability and the accommodation point of view, a lot of it falls within environmental. So it can be anywhere from rainwater harvesting, which is collecting the rainwater and using it as like pool or shower or tap water throughout the resort. It can also be just partnering with local tours and experiences, so that even the tours that they're offering, whether that be in-house or just like who they're partnering with, has sustainable and ethical measures in place, which can look like safe distances from wildlife. I stayed at this one lodge before that just didn't even use diesel in their engines when you're out on like a safari, and they also had noise mitigation so that the engines wouldn't disrupt the wildlife. So there's different measures like that. And then from a social perspective, it's sourcing locally, it's employing locals, it's sometimes if they'll have a shop in their accommodation, then it's all locally sourced handicrafts and products that can contribute towards like the community, that also represent the culture and the local culture that's around. And yeah, really just like being mindful of waste, energy, and water, and implementing measures that will help out travelers to be mindful as well. And yeah, making sure that the environment is most positively impacted, not negatively impacted. And yeah, I think just like partnering with suppliers and ensuring that their supply chain for their restaurant and like where they're sourcing their toiletries is important, and reducing the plastic as well. So those are just some examples.
That's a lot of things that I hadn't thought of in the past. So I'm glad that you brought this up.
Yeah, no, there's a lot. We actually had a meeting this morning, and I was like, we might need to narrow this down because there's so many. But we try to stay within the three categories: environmental, sociocultural, and economic.
I love that. Well, we're almost at the top of the hour here, so if anybody else has any questions, I encourage you to drop them in the box while we still have Jaclyn here for a few minutes. Mark or Reeve, I'll let you wrap up with any questions that you have. And other than that, I just want to thank you for coming on with us today. Your work is amazing. I'm so inspired by everything that you're doing and the change that you're making. I think it's really important. I think it's really great timing right now, especially your target audience. So I really appreciate you coming on with us today. So if you just have any closing thoughts, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated being here. I can't believe how fast this hour just went by. Like I looked at my clock and I was like, wow, it's already 7. So I really respect what you all are doing too, and I'm really happy to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about Ecomadic and our mission and what the impact that we're trying to make. So if for all the viewers out there, you're not following along already, you can follow Ecomadic on Instagram, and you can check out our new magazine, which is just magazine.ecomadic.com, that you can find through our Instagram link tree as well. But yeah, just keep supporting us and following along. And if you support sustainable tourism too, we want to hear from you. So please reach out, and you can connect with me either on my personal account or just through Ecomadic. But again, really appreciate being here, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Jaclyn. It's been awesome. I can't wait to connect again in the future and see all the amazing things you're doing.
Yes, likewise. Keep it up on your end as well.
Bye. Have a good